أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشرف الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم إنا نبرأ إليك من حولنا وقوتنا ونلتجئ إلى حولك وقوتك وفضلك وكرمك يا ذا القوة المتين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وبعد فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله. We'll continue with the fourth hadith in the Nawawi collection, and in the last two lectures I believe we covered most of the hadith and we reached till the last section. I'm just gonna refresh your memories and inshallah add a couple of things just to complete the topic of Qadar, because as we mentioned before, the most important topic that this hadith discusses is the topic of Qadar. Therefore, the Imam Nawawi selected it as part of the fundamental hadith of his collection. And we discussed the four elements of the Qadar, which is al-ilm wal-kitabatu wal-mashi'atu wal-khalq. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with His eternal, infinite knowledge and wisdom, He knew ahead of time what is going to happen. And that knowledge was recorded, that is the kitaba, right? And then everything that happens still happens with His will, that is the Mashiach. Although He provided the human being with the free will as well, but that free will within a circle, as we mentioned the example, everything is superseded by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all the actions, everything that happens, is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, including the Mashiach of the insan. Allahu khalaqakum wa ma ta'malun. Allah has created you and all that you do. Then we concluded that the Qadar as such is not the obligation and it's not the forceful will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a human being to do certain things, right? It is just, what He knew ahead of time and what He's holding him accountable. And as such, we distinguish between the knowledge before the action and the knowledge after the action, right? The knowledge of before the action is that part of His rububiyyah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He knows everything, right? And then after the action takes place, then that is when the servant is held accountable. That's the hisab, right? Then we talked about the hidayah, because the companions, as we recited the hadith last time, asked the Prophet ﷺ, if everything is written already, then why should we do things, right? فَفِيمَ الْعَمَلِ, why would we do this and that? So the Prophet ﷺ said, do, work, act, for فَكُلٌّ مُيَسَّرٌ لِمَا خُلِقَ لَهُ. For everyone will be guided or facilitated to what has been written. And the explanation of muyassar is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran by saying, فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ وَاسْتَغْنَى وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. So those who believe will be guided to the husna, and on the other hand, those who disbelieve will be, basically, that will lead them to the other outcome, which is the failure in this life and in the hereafter. And that is the tawfiq again, is or the hidayah. The hidayah of the dilala, the irshad, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it clear. This is the guidance, and He made the challenge, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants to believe, accept here it is, and whoever wants to deny, it's your choice as well, right? Whereas the tawfiq, that is the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, overlooking His servants kindly and lovingly and facilitating that and creating that energy inside them that pulls them to the guidance of Allah. But that starts again with the intention of the abd. Is that clear? That would basically summarize what we've discussed so far. Now, before I move forward with the rest of the hadith, I just want to give you an analogy to understand the qadar in a different way. A lot of times, if you want to understand certain things, just contrast it with an opposite example. So, if someone says, no, the qadar doesn't mean that, and we're not given a free will, right? So what does that mean? So let's contrast it. What, as we mentioned last time, what are the implications of that? Right? So you mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forcing you to do everything, right? Just like we answered that question for the Nigerian brother. So you mean that Allah is forcing you to do everything, right? And all what Allah has done, sending you the Quran and sending you the messengers, is just like for no reason, right? It doesn't make sense. We mentioned that in details last time, but what I want to conclude with that contrasting example is this is what led people to become actually a sect well known historically as the Jabriya. People who believe that everything is mandatory, right? Now, what does that mean again to become those who believe that all deeds are forced on us? That contradicts with the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You mean Allah is just out of His whim is doing this, oppressing you, and He's going to take you to hellfire? Even a human being wouldn't do that. See what I'm saying? So follow with that logic or illogic till the end, and you understand that it's flawed. It's impossible, right? And the only explanation is to understand the qadar the way we understood it and the way we explained it. On the other hand, and that's becoming more common actually than the other extreme, are those who deny the qadar completely and tell you the human being is in control and creates or initiates their own actions, right? And some people go to an extreme, like, really, like, you think Allah would know these actions ahead of time? So they say, okay, let's do you a favor and make it look better. So they're trying to create, a case. It's like they're doing Allah a favor. We cannot believe in qadar, but in a different way. How? Allah knows about the action only when it happens, right? So that, negates the need for, like, it's not written before, right? And is only held accountable when they do it, right? So you mean Allah, so what that implies, you mean Allah doesn't know about things ahead of time, right? Then Allah is deficient, right? And that contradicts the aspects of His Lordship, Rabb subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And some of the most famous people who did that, actually, this is what they call al-Qadariyya, by the way. So these are the Qadar deniers, right? And the Prophet ﷺ actually spoke about those and said, these are the people who are the dogs of the hellfire. Okay? So basically, this, like, not even the regular people in the hellfire. قَالَ كِلَابُ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. The worst of those of the hellfire. And a lot of, actually, this is very common amongst philosophers, because really you think Allah, they think it contradicts the attributes of Allah to know every single detail. And Allah in the Quran, it clearly states that there is nothing on earth or in the heavens but He knows. Even when a leaf drops, He knows about it. It's in the book, right? And it's the human being, subhanAllah, imagine yourself trying to think about all the creation now. Who's going to feed this and who's going to... It's inconceivable, right? So these people say, well, it is impossible for Allah to know these details. Why? Because they're likening Allah to a human being. Does that make sense? And that's where the issue is, how is that possible? Of course, that's why you're a human being. You're a creation. And Allah is nothing like you and you're nothing like Allah. Right? Amongst those most famous, actually, philosophers throughout history is the Maimonides, actually. And that is the Jewish tradition and belief. Al-Maymun, or Ibn Maymun. Right? And some people like to, it makes sense, right? No, it does not, actually. And they think it's scientific. God doesn't have to. No, you are making Allah, you're measuring, or you're applying the standards of a human being to Allah, to God, who is God, and He's the creator and you're a creation. Does that make sense? So these are subtle things, because a lot of people tell you, there is a scholar in Islam who said an opinion. These opinions don't matter, because they contradict the aspects of perfection and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't care who said that, right? This is the Aqidah 101, the alphabet, right? Allah is perfect deity with all aspects of perfection and completion. And this is when you say subhanallah, what does subhanallah mean? When you say subhanallah, what does subhanallah?
Allah is apart from any imperfection. Allah is above any imperfection or part.
So subhanallah is say glorified and exalted, meaning you're affirming that He has all aspects of perfection and lacks any deficiency. That's what subhanallah means. Usabbihu subhana, meaning I always affirmly attribute all the perfection to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who think, it is more practical or makes more sense, actually it's the exact opposite. Why? Yeah, it makes sense for you as a human being not to know these micro details. And this is exactly why you're a human being. And that's exactly what distinguishes God, a creator, a Lord, from His creation. Does that make sense? Some scholars did say that, because they were impacted or influenced by the Greek mythology and the Mu'tazilis, and it is wrong. And we're always welcoming to different opinions, so long it's valid. But this one violates the core of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do you mean? God wouldn't know? You think, you're doing me a favor or doing Allah a favor by saying He wouldn't know what's going to happen the day after tomorrow? See that? Always think it that way. Think it through in a contrasted way to see where that is going to lead. So now you have one example that is the extreme, and I usually start teaching the Qadar actually by giving you what does it mean to believe in this extreme and what does it lead to believe in this extreme. So if you're saying a human being, what they say in Arabic, musayya, meaning always forced or obligated to do certain things, okay, so what does that mean? Allah is like a tyrant oppressor, and the Prophet wasted his time, alayhi salatu wasalam, fighting wars and trying to teach people for no reason, when God has already decided who's going to go to hellfire and who's going to go to paradise no matter what. Right? I mean, even a human being wouldn't do that. And you're accepting that this is the God you worship or you believe He's the perfect deity. Right? Is that clear? As such, no. Qadar in that concept is a flawed concept. You cannot understand Qadar that way. On the other hand, you're saying, oh, so you're in control. No, you're not. Right? And reality proves that you're not in control. And if that meaning like Allah doesn't know and Allah does not control things and Allah does not, His will does not takes precedence over your will. Is that clear? So this is the thing you need to keep in mind. The Jabriya and the Qadariya. People felt like everything is forced on the human being by Allah. And the other thing, no, Allah is not in control, does not know things and does not mobilize things. I'm in control. Right? And Ahlul Sunnati wasatun bayna dhalik. They're moderate, and that's the wasatiyya, meaning they got the perfect, right, rectified understanding of the qadar. You have a free will, but everything within the knowledge, within the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One last example, just to clarify this again, and I will conclude with this example, inshallah. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, as I mentioned, was asked by the companions, فَفِيمَ الْعَمَلُ, why bother even do things, right? And he answered them. Same thing, Ali bin Abi Talib, and I like this quote because he specifically mentioned this statement that you will hear, inshallah. So he was in one of his travels, you know, Ghazu and you know, all the fitan that Ali alayhi ta'ala was exposed to. He was accompanied by one of the people who was evidently primitive in his knowledge and understanding to Islam. And he asked Ali radiallahu anhu, like, you see our travel, our walking, our doing this and effort, right? Is this our own doing or it is by the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So Ali bin Abi Talib, it is of course the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever you do is by the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that guy said, oh my gosh, basically all the reward is lost. Right? Basically we're not going to be rewarded for that. Because if Allah is the one who is moving you, you know, and taking you here and there, then it's out of your will basically. So you're just blindly being mobilized around, right? And Ali radiallahu anhu beautifully addressed it. Yeah, Sheikh, he addressed him as a Sheikh. This is not what the Qadar means. The Qadar, he said, is not the Jabr. Is that clear? Is not the forceful force of Allah moving you. It's not Allah's control over you without your will. Yes, any step you take, any travel you do, any effort is by the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But not the hatim, not the jabr, meaning not outside your control. And you are held accountable for your effort, for your intention. That's the irada. Is that clear? And that's very much, subhanAllah, this statement by itself sums it up. That is the complete summary of the topic of the qadar. Whether it's in a good sense or, because the Prophet ﷺ clearly mentioned in the hadith, which is we had the second hadith, وَتُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ. Right? What is good and bad. Because some people would say, like, these are good deeds. Are they by the qadar of Allah? Yes. Are the bad deeds by the qadar of Allah? Yes. And you're held accountable. And that's when we say, يَخْلُقُ الشَّرَّ وَلَا يَرْضَى. Right? When we were kids, and that's, subhanAllah, I still get asked this question by kids, like, why Allah created snakes, right? Because snakes are harmful. Yeah, that doesn't mean Allah wants you to put your hand in the mouth of a snake, right? That doesn't mean when He created cars, told you to have car accidents, right? But it is the khalq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is that clear? So that snake example is very deep, profound question. And that is al-qadar khayrihi wa sharrihi. This shaykh happened to ask Ali about the good deeds he's doing. And other people, like others, blame it on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, if Allah want me not to do this, then I wouldn't do it. And Allah said that actually. وَلَوْ أَرَادَ رَبُّكَ لَهَدَى النَّاسَ كُلَّهُمْ. If Allah wanted, He would force people into guidance. Right? But He did not, because He wants to see what you're going to do and hold you accountable for that. Is that clear? Is Allah capable of just creating people in one state? That's what He did with the angels, right? But He did not create us as angels. That's why we're human beings, right? وَمَا يَزَالُوا مُخْتَلِفِينَ وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ. But they continue to be different and diverse, and for that reason He created them. Why did He create them and did this test? Because He does what He wants to do. As He mentioned, لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. No one can question why He did what He did. But you are questioned. But you realize whatever He did is out of mercy and wisdom and justice. And anything to the contrary negates His lordship. So that's why, again, and this is the last point I want to emphasize, in the Quran there is nothing which says يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, right? They believe in Allah and the last day. And the kutub, it doesn't say يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْقَدَرِ. And we mentioned that clearly before. Why? Because the qadar actually is part of in believing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the very core of the lordship, al-rububiyyah. It's inseparable. When you believe Allah is a God, that means He's the one in charge, He's the one in control. Right? But the Prophet ﷺ dissected it out to emphasize and reiterate that concept. And not even said al-qadar. Then He even went to two subcategories, khayrihi wa sharrihi. So no questions asked. Right? Is that clear? Because some people, they don't care about asking the good deeds, right? And some people would only ask about the evil, the bad stuff. But the Prophet, number one, said al-qadar, and he specifically mentioned khayrihi wa sharrihi. Let no doubt be in minds. Clear? Otherwise, it would have been part of believing in Allah as a Rabb. What is the Rabb? أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ. To Him belongs the creation and the command and the order. What is the command and the order? Is our Sharia, our Islamic laws, and the universal laws, how this universe operates, and that is the qadar in its two aspects. Clear? This is it. Small break.
Just the English definition of qadar as decree, therefore, is kind of problematic, right?
It's very problematic, and that's why I don't like using foreign idioms or terminology, because it butchers the word. Al-Qadar, the best translation for Qadar is Qadar. just say it Qadar, and that is it. Understand the concept, and that will be it. I like to use the word measurement, actually. Yes. Measurement, because Qadar is to measure. And everything is measured by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, when you're open a cookbook and you're trying to read a recipe, what do they put for you? The first thing is ingredients. right? Just crude ingredients, what you're gonna get. Eggs and flour and this. And then measurements, right? That's exactly what Qadar is. And if you err, something different would come out. This is exactly the shara' of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by measurement. In a certain way, in a certain amount, in a certain pattern. And the shara' of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything is measured. إِنَّا كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَاهُ بِقَدَرٍ. Indeed, everything we have created by a qadar, a measure. Okay? وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ عِنْدَهُ بِمِقْدَارٍ. And everything to him is done بِمِقْدَارٍ, according to a precise measure. So that's what I would like to use normally, measurement. But people wouldn't get it. Unless you understand the chapter, you wouldn't know what the title talks about. But truly, that's what it is.
I think with that translation of measurement, Swahili language that uses the same word that translates into measurement and not what translates into decree.
So what do you use in Swahili?
So in Swahili, makadirio, that's basically the
Okay.
measurement. Yes.
Good. So let's
The root word.
check our brother Yaman's skills in cooking. So if you open an Arabic book of cooking, what do you say about the measures?
I've never opened a book.
Maqadir.
Maqadir.
That's in Arabic. Maqadiriya in Swahili, maqadir in Arabic. Al-maqadir. It's the plural of miqdar, which Allah said, وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ عِنْدَهُ بِمِقْدَارٍ. Maqadir is the measurements, basically.
Awesome.
Easy and simple. So now it makes sense. Okay? So we move to the last part of the hadith, which continues that a person would do the deeds of the people of Jannah, meaning righteous deeds, till he appears is very close to it, like an arm span away from it. But then, يَسْبِقُ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابِ, meaning what's in the book precedes. That he's going to enter the hellfire and will be admitted to the hellfire. What does that mean? Does that mean Allah forced him in the hellfire? No, simple. What is the first hadith you read in the collection of the Nawawi is? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Basically, these are based on their intentions, right? Meaning, if someone does whatever they do, the deeds of paradise, of the people of paradise, the righteous deeds, they pray, they fast, they lecture, they give in charity, they do jihad. But if they lack the niyyah, then they're null. It doesn't matter. To you it would look, wow, these people are very close to Jannah, right? They're gonna die and they're an arm span. All what matters just like lost the breath out and they go to Jannah. But Allah knew ahead of time and knows what's in their hearts, and their intention was not right, and as such recorded them based on His knowledge that they're not going to the Jannah. And on the other hand, a person might do the bad deeds, but then he will make tawbah and no one might know about him, right? And based on what's in his heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take him to the paradise. Is that clear? Very simple. This section of the hadith could be summarized that deeds and the admission to Jannah or Nar is based on what's the intention is. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Done. This is why the first hadith is always إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, because it determines everything you do. That is the core of all our religion, actually. This is why scholars said there is not anything you do in the matters of dunya or akhirah, but this hadith would interfere with. Anything you do, there is a thought. That's the niyyah, it's the thought, your intention behind the word, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply, you want to do things no matter what, no matter how good they are. And this is the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ told you that people would come in the day of judgment with deeds, with acts, like mountains. Mountains. And you would put it in the scale, and it weighs none. Why? It lacked the sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is that fair or not?
Yes.
Why? Because the first hadith we started was إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Don't go to even further before this hadith is understood. How many lectures did we spend on that hadith? 4, 5, maybe 4, 5 hours. Why? Because because of this hadith. So no one would waste their times unless they're truly sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is how beautiful the deen is. A person could spend their life lost, and yet one breath before they die, they make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah will admit them to paradise. Did that happen? Yes. During the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, some people, a companion, and you call him a companion, subhanallah, he entered the Jannah, the Prophet said, and he did not make one single sajda to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not a single sajda. He made Islam, fought for the sake of Allah. The day before he was a kafir. And he was martyred and he's in paradise. And you call him Sahabi and you say radiyallahu anhu, and you ask Allah to elevate his and he is given the promise he's in paradise and we're not. And how many sajda did he make to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Not a single one. Not a single one. I know a person, subhanallah, he was in Syria. He was a very famous figure actually. Then I was visiting a sheikh, and that guy was a Christian. And the sheikh was saying rahimahullah, and everyone was like, said yes. The last week of his life he became a Muslim, subhanallah. No one knew about that. Not even his kids. His daughter knew, subhanallah. And she became a Muslim after his death. For about 79 years, 79 years, you're saying this guy is non-Muslim. And now, may Allah accept him. And everyone makes dua for him for forgiveness and rahmah, right? So that, again, it's an emphasis on the importance of the niyyah. And that the qadar, say Allah doesn't only know what's outside, what's inside. And that's what the hadith tells you too. That the knowledge of Allah is not only limited to what's outside, to what's invisible to you. And that is recorded as well. And if you think otherwise, someone says, that doesn't make sense. You mean Allah does not know your intention? Is that clear? So this is what I want you to take the hadith a step further. Like, okay, you're saying this doesn't make sense, and why would someone like do all these good deeds and end in the hellfire? Right? We tell them yes, because they didn't have the right intention. Well, how would we know? Well, Allah knows. And if you say no, you mean Allah doesn't know what their intention is, and He didn't record that either? Is that clear?
Yes.
Brother in Nigeria, I hope this explains it now. So, is the hadith clear now? So, this is how it started, with the creation of the human being, with the qadar, and then again, emphasis on the importance of the purity, the sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also the how that fits in the qadar. Again, it's not forced on you. You decide, and you better have the right intention, and re-examine your deeds and make sure that they're always rectified and they're always pure to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Questions?
So the part about the proximity to hellfire and paradise, how close they get, that's our perception of those people in this world. It's not like they earn to get that close and then Allah offers for And you-
Yeah, meaning the exactly proximity in our human sense. Meaning they have one day to die, right? And there is a different hadith where Allah actually would unveil their real intentions. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, and they would flip. So the one who has good heart, good intention, they would make tawbah and would be visible to people. And others, who had bad intentions, all of a sudden, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, and you see that, subhanAllah, towards the end of their time. Ibn Abbas actually said, gave an example, where, because وَنَزِيدُ الَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا هُدًى, if someone is guided, Allah will give him more guidance, right? So Ibn Abbas said someone would be doing good deeds all their life, and before they die, they would be unfair in the way they distribute their inheritance to their children, right? So their real servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifested that they're not completely in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they would commit that act, and that act would lead them to hellfire.
But that was the state their whole time.
Exactly. I mean, and that means when you're doubting the lordship of Allah, the shara of Allah, and now you're gonna do a better judge than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was way along your life. It did not just happen. But now something big would make you do it, would unveil it, basically. And same thing, this is, I hope I don't take you away from the main topic, but I'll give you an example, and I told you this before. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send to people tests, afflict them with this and that? Why?
So he may know the truthful from the liars.
The what?
So he may know the truthful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us, right?
Yes, why would he send a disaster for this person?
It's like self-realization, so that person can realize.
Exactly. So you discover yourself. Is that clear?
لِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ.
So you would know yourself first, Say what did I do? It's like when you see your iman is shaking. Allah is sending you a small dose actually, just to see you're not good. All what it took that you lost some wealth and you lost your mind and faith with it, that means all what you've been doing, all this fasting and all this and that, no good. You need to work harder.
It's mercy.
Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting you through a stress test actually to see your real heart. Okay? So, you think you're good? No, you're not. And so, this is exactly the catastrophes, the disasters, the tribulations. These are stress tests to your iman actually. See how strong your iman and how sustainable it is, right? That is the first lesson you learn from any bala from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for those, who have good hearts, strong hearts, then it becomes endurance. Allah is preparing them for more responsibilities, for more tasks, to help others, and right? But it starts with the first thing, and this is exactly what we're talking about. A lot of people, their real faith shows when? During a stress test. You think if Allah is, everyone's sending them big salary and good lives, good children, everyone's healthy, everyone's in the moment.
Everyone's a woman, yeah.
Of course. What does the real iman show? During stress tests, that's the real iman. We're all fit now, right? When would you know a person who's really fit or not? Get on the road and run 5 miles and see who's gonna do it, right? But as we're talking and smiling, everyone looks great.
It's like Hajj.
Just like Hajj. Right? Same thing with the iman. So that's why a lot of people, they're doing good, and one shake, and When it comes to the wealth, no, I'm not gonna do it. So you're playing God now. I'm not gonna do it the way Allah wants. Like as if you're saying, I know better. This is what Ibn Abbas is saying. Is it a big deal just to do the mirath yourself? It is a big deal because now you think what you can do is better than what Allah told you to do. That's why this trivial act that appears, what's the big deal? The mirath could be $10,000 only, for God's sake. It is not about the amount actually. It's about what you've done. That you think Allah's distribution is not good enough and you can do a better job. It's like you're being defiant to the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's how serious I said, and that will admit him to the hellfire. Yet, all these things are not permanent, stay in the hellfire, obviously. It depends on how big or small that act is. Any questions about the hadith before we move to the next hadith? This session is only for the people who attend the class, unless we did not address it. Because what's going to happen now, I'm not going to repeat the Qadar topic. So if this question is relevant, directly we'll address it. If not, we're not going to take another lecture. Go ahead.
Sometimes we say if Qadar's situation is there, it is because it happened because it was written on the fate.
Right.
So written on fate, what I am not expecting, say I give you a very simple example. Today, before Maghrib prayer, 20 minutes before, I almost come to mosque, but I ended up only one rakah. So sometimes I say because it is written on the fate.
Right.
Although I don't express it, but in my heart I am saying it is written on the fate.
Right.
So written fate, it is the part of Qadar or it is something else?
Yeah, to understand the answer to this question, you have to listen to the previous lecture completely, and you'll find the answer there, inshallah. But I'm going to add one important point to that, actually, that Musa alayhi salam was debating with Adam alayhi salam. He was telling them, like, dude, I mean, you ate that thing and you got us out of the Jannah. Why do you do that? So Adam said, like, you are arguing with me about something that has been written, recorded 50 years before I was created. Right? And then he recited the ayah. The ayah in the Quran about that. And then the Prophet said, فَحَجَّ آدَمُ مُوسَى فَحَجَّهُ, meaning he really prevailed over him. Meaning that, and this is what the scholar said, you can use the qadar as an excuse for the masa'ib, but not the na'aib. Meaning for a disaster that happened, but not for a sin. And this Adam thing was an exception, because even that qadar was basically the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah would have willed something different, but He allowed it to happen. And that's what Adam alayhi salam meant. Now, all the things that happen out of your control or out of your knowledge is the qadar. And basically they are forced on you. Does that make sense? Example, you go and you have to be at work at 8 o'clock. And you had a car accident. This is a qadar of Allah. This is here you're forced. This is not your choice. So that's when you're musayyar. Is that clear? Anything within your will, within your control, that's when you're mukhayyar. You're given a choice.
Pushing the snooze one more time. Like pushing the snooze button one more time. That's why you're late.
Or texting while you're driving.
Yeah.
Or text the lunch.
Is that clear? So, in Arabic, there's always this kind of theoretical question: is the human being mukhayyar or musayyar, like given free will and he's in control of his actions, or out of control completely. It's a mix. We say that things that are out of your control or happen in you without your control, right? You're out of control. Meaning, did you have a choice in how you set up your DNA, how tall you are, and what color your eyes are going to be? And no. So this is forced. Yeah, Allah forced these things on you, and you have no choice. And the test is not about what's out of your control. The test, what is Allah is holding you accountable, is about what's within your control. Is that clear? So there is qadar, and it is always, important to use the qadar. We as culturally, and I can generalize here, it's the common culture of the Muslim countries to blame everything on qadar. It's a tendency. Unlike here, by the way, they're on the other extreme because they don't believe in the qadar. Well, except for some nuts, and the radical things, when they say, there is an element of faith, like when things happen for a reason. This things happen for a reason is a dangerous statement, by the way, because it entails a lot of things. When things happen for a reason, believing in qadar, yes. But when someone does something bad and say things happen for a reason, they mean like it's forced on me. So sometimes it makes sense, but sometimes it does not make sense. And that's again blaming it on the qadar. Right? So, but the majority or the secular people or, everyone's in charge. We go to the other extreme, Allah has written it on me. Yeah, it is written, but that doesn't mean you were forced. Is that clear? So there has to be the right understanding of what qadar is and living it the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly had the qadar. And not coming up with elements that does not belong to the qadar. Evidently, as you can see now, understanding what the qadar is and the way it's believed and practiced in the Muslim and the non-Muslim world. So, it is almost 8:45. Let's start with the fifth hadith, inshallah.